Hey guys, day 26, we're going to talk about plateaus because you might have already started to reach some occasionally. Inevitably, you're going to. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is your body is changing. So, if you are losing weight, for example, at the end of a month, you could have lost 8, 9, 10, even more pounds. Think about 2, 3 months down the road when you're 20, 30 pounds lighter. Cardiovascular system is not working at the same level. You're getting healthier. I remember one client a while ago, I put this case study in one of my books. In 30 days, he walked in, we started his nutrition plan, he started doing some progressive training. 30 days later, his blood lipid levels, his LDLs, had gone from 900 to 90 in just 30 days. That's how rapid you could be making changes internally and even in your musculoskeletal system tied to your cardiovascular system. You're going to see this domino effect of increased efficiency. Metabolism could be in some ways increasing because of the thermic effect of your food, because of training, because of consistency, but at the same time you are becoming more efficient. And so one of the big myths in nutrition is a lot of people think, hey, as soon as I'm my leanest and healthiest, my metabolism is going to be off the chart. That's my goal, is I'm raising my metabolism. And I hate to break the news to you, but the opposite happens. Because as you become leaner and healthier and more efficient, you just don't utilize as many calories. So the good news is your body is adjusting to that and you're not as hungry. I've noticed throughout my career, because my weight has fluctuated almost 40 or 50 pounds from my really aggressive experimental times when I was training like a power lifter, trying to gain as much as I could over a couple year span, all the way to being a pro bodybuilder and being in the 4 or 5% body fat range. So my body has changed that much in different periods. And my calorie intake, I remember losing weight eating about 2,800 to 3,000 calories because I was coming down from that heavier level. And then all of a sudden, when I'm 155, 160 pounds, I have to eat 1,800 to 2,000 calories just to keep losing. So you might think, wow, that's horrible. Why would you go to the bother of getting healthier and leaner if it just makes you eat less food? But in fact, your hunger, things like that are identical. You know, your body, your cravings, your physiological hunger is really tied to a couple things. Number one, body fat level, and that's kind of the chronic symptom. And then number two, it's just your meal to meal management like you're already experiencing. So blood sugar levels, that kind of thing, time between meals. So I don't want to scare you. I don't want you to think there's something, bad that's going to happen and it's going to be horrible because you're getting leaner. But you have to have that understanding in mind. Otherwise, you're going to get sucked into some of that mythology that you should be eating more as you're getting leaner. And in fact, most people, as I said with myself at my heaviest, eating that much food, as I got leaner and leaner and leaner, I had to keep reducing calories a little bit to keep progressing. So keep that in mind. There's going to be some dynamic activity to your monitoring of your data and then interpreting it. I keep talking about the scientific method and then how we make those adjustments. So let's consider, first of all, a plateau, because I get these questions all the time. We have more than 100 Diet Doc owners around the world, and they're all busy seeing clients and so forth. And a lot of times I get pulled into conversations. Probably the most common is somebody who just says, Joe, I have this client, and I know what's going to happen next. They're going to say they're plateaued. They're not losing weight fast enough. And my first question is always, let me see the data. I need to see their cumulative history, because I want to see if they've been dieting for 2 months or 6 months or 2 weeks, where they started. I've got to see their exact performance. Don't tell me what you told them to do. I need to see what they've actually been doing. And so the first thing I do is survey that long-term history, and 99 out of 100 times I get my answers there. I can see places where they had vacations or holidays or something where food went up a little bit, or maybe some days they weren't tracking, and I know that there was probably a potential error there because of that, or at least the propensity for that. Again, could be vacations and so forth. And so I often just have to say, hey, let's just get consistent again. Let's make sure we're doing those things, and we'll go from there. And let's just give it a week or two. Most of the time, they clear right up. I often will find these pockets of time where they really lost well. And I might say, well, what were they doing then? Let's isolate down into even their food sources. Were there any changes? Sometimes it could be like a job change, or kids were in school, now they're out of school, so everybody's meal cycles and food sources are different. So look for some of those things yourself. When you are frustrated, you're looking at your data, you might not be losing, you think you're at a plateau, look through that history, and it's going to be really easy to see in your average macronutrient intake, your average calorie intake. You might see some places where, my carbs started increasing gradually over time over those few weeks, and now that I've pulled it back to where I used to be, now I'm losing again just fine. So I'm telling you, 99 out of 100 times, the answers are right there in that history. But, as I said, there are definitely times when you're going to need to make some adjustments. And so it might be, if we're talking about a reduction, if you have truly plateaued, it might be that you need to bring carbs or fat down, but I still want to talk about some other things first. The last thing I want to do is reduce food. That's the final, last resort. So first of all, I'm looking at history. I'm looking at things that we've done that have worked in the past. Sometimes it's meal formatting. So I'm looking at consistency and accuracy first. Then I'm looking at food sources. And sometimes it can be that somebody's eating a lot of artificial sweetener type foods, or they're getting a lot of processed foods. When you get things in packages that have nutrition fact panels and so forth, those things aren't always accurate. The requirements for the FDA are that they're just 20% accurate one way or the other, or I should say 80% accurate. So it could be 20% under or over in calories. And food companies get busted all the time when they're tested because their calculations are way off. And of course, typically, if they're going to err on the side of anything, it's going to be lower in calories, because that's what a lot of consumers want. So the more packaged foods somebody is eating can often be a problem with a plateau. So reducing the number of processed foods, increasing whole foods, can immediately make somebody start losing faster, even though they think they're getting the same macronutrient levels, calorie levels. Same thing goes with eating out. I'm telling you, the people who eat out the most lose the slowest. And it doesn't have to be an intentional issue. It can just simply be that we're at the same behest, so to speak, of somebody else, those levels of food. Even if you're going to websites and looking at nutrition fact panel information, it may not be accurate. Not every person at every restaurant is using the same amounts of the same food. So it's a place where you guys know I want you to be comfortable being flexible. I want you to eat in restaurants, eat the foods you like. But if you're experiencing plateaus, that's a place to make some changes. You might have to be extra careful eating out, or you just might have to really limit how many times you're eating out for the sake of meeting your goal. So if that's your priority, that just might be a place you have to dig in with a little more effort and do some more cooking at home and so forth. So the last thing I do is look at formats. Maybe, as we talked about earlier with intermittent fasting methods and so forth, maybe you've gotten the habit of just grazing a little too much. Every time you're hungry, you're eating that next meal a little too soon, you're breaking your food up into smaller increments, and sometimes that has an effect where we're just not giving ourselves the time between meals to utilize more body fat as energy. So that's when you need to pull those things apart a little bit. Watch the clock, be disciplined, and say, I'm just going to have to do that for a while and see if that helps me break through this plateau. So the very last thing I do, after all of those just assessment type methods, as well as going through food timing and food source and so forth, is look at an actual change. As I started this segment, we might have to just reduce carbs and fat a little bit, but as I mentioned in another discussion, use increments that you know are tolerable. 100 calories in chunks of 25 grams of carbs, 10 grams of fat, things like that. Don't overdo your changes. Don't be somebody who's using knee-jerk reactions every time you feel like you're stuck. Sometimes you just have to be patient and get into that next week and look at that cumulative data. So we'll talk about this a little bit more as we wrap up here, but we'll stop there, and I'll see you guys back here tomorrow.